Ninamani. My name is Gloria Strzelecki, and I'd like to just acknowledge again that we are on Kaurna country, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and those emerging. I'd like to also mention that today I'm going to introduce artists by including language groups, as this connects people more specifically and uniquely to their specific country. Where I speak broadly, I will say Aboriginal person or Aboriginal artist. Aboriginal culture is the oldest living continuous culture in the world. And art is one of the most important vehicles in which the transmission of important cultural knowledge occurs from one generation to the next. And in 60,000 years of continuous culture, Aboriginal people have undergone significant periods of change, with most of that occurring in the last 250 years, or since colonisation. Today, I'm going to be talking to the topic of limitless change, and I'm going to look at a few examples of works of art which demonstrate that adaptation and innovation are integral to the continuation and survival of Aboriginal culture, all while sharing old and new histories, but also creating new stories. And while the COVID-19 pandemic continues to shape and change our world today, it is the innovation and adaptation seen in these works of art by these artists and other Aboriginal artists that show art is a limitless tool in which change is both witnessed but also instigated. Now, the word limitless suggests a collapsing of binaries or boundaries that are created by time. And the Western concept of time is often thought as linear. Today, I want you to think of time as something that is, however, infinitely reflexive, something that reflects upon itself, where the past, the present, and the future all collapse. So time isn't like an arrow, but like a boomerang, to paraphrase the writer Ralph Ellison. And this is because this is what makes Aboriginal art inherently timeless. And I'm going to quote the academic Jennifer Biddle. Experimentation in remote Aboriginal art is neither new nor an anathema to tradition. Aboriginal art is both new, old, it is timeless, it is everywhere. I'm going to also start by looking at this slide, and yep, that's me, standing in front of a phone booth on Grenfell Street here in Adelaide. But the reason why I'm showing you this personal picture is because it includes a poster for the Indigenous art campaign, Our Art is Our Lifetime, which was launched during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this poster includes the Gunwinku artist Gabriel Maunura, who works from Gumbalanya at Inullak Arts. He's one of the faces of this campaign, which was launched during COVID-19, but speaks to issues beyond that. It reignites conversations around the fair, ethical, and transparent trade and production of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art. What it also does is it reignites another conversation around the power of art. The power of art and how art is a lifeline for many artists. It's a cultural, intellectual, political, but also economic lifeline. And I'm going to talk about some of the power that art has today to you all. Now, in 1963, the Australian government consented to the mining of bauxite in Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory. And this was done without the permission of the Yolngu people. The Yolngu people responded by creating a series of bark paintings which included petitions, written both in English but also in Yolngu, stating that they had ties to that country since time immemorial. Now, these bark paintings and petitions were called and are called the Yirrkala bark petitions, such as the one behind me. They were presented to parliamentarians, supporters, and also to the Australian government's House of Representatives. And although the claim was lost at that time, what this series of paintings did was it sparked a conversation around native title. And this is the first example where art is integral to the case, to native title litigation. So from this moment, for the Yolngu people, but other language groups, art becomes a powerful political tool, stating claims to country and fighting for rights. Now, there is a Yolngu edit which speaks, if you paint the land, you must use the land. And indeed, the Yirrkala bark petition painters used the land to paint their land. They used the eucalyptus tetradonta or stringy bark tree. They used natural earth pigments, all to state claims to their country. Now, thinking that in order to continue and to progress, this idea of adaptation and innovation, but also pushing boundaries as being something necessary to continue culture, the artist and leader of the Madapa clan, Djambawa Marawili, thought there's got to be another way of thinking where we can still uphold that Yolngu edit, but think differently, push boundaries artistically, creatively. And so Djambawa Marawili begins painting with invisibility. What that means is he creates a veil around the sacred information that his minji or his designs tell. And so while we can't see that important cultural information in this work of art, what we can feel at least is the power of that information. Now, this is a watershed moment for Yolngu artists because it means they can push boundaries creatively. They can still uphold and share that important cultural information, but they can remain relevant for future generations. And an artist who's actually continuing from this moment is the octogenarian Nongana Marawili. Now, she paints her country with this bold pink colour. Now, this colour doesn't exist naturally on country. She sources this colour by sourcing the ink from disused printer cartridges that would otherwise be refuse on her country. She takes that ink and mixes it with white clay or gapan. And this is her loophole to that Yolngu edit I spoke about before. Now, Nongana paints the elemental forces at play on country, such as lightning. But her clever use of recycling also speaks to a silent type of activism that is perhaps akin to that of the Yirrkala bark petition painters. Here's a picture of Nongana. Now, where other artists are perhaps working in other ways as well, there are artists that are using using technology to push creative boundaries, such as Yolngu artist Ishmael Marika and the late Norapor Wongamura. This is an installation from 2017, which saw 15 hollow log ossuaries, or larrakitch, combined with a moving image component and a sound component. Now, the 15 larrakitch were painted with Wanapini clouds and triangular shapes. The Wanapini cloud is associated with the Macassan story, which brought fishermen from Sulawesi to Australia as early as the 12th century to trade trepang, whereas the triangular shapes speak to the sails on the boats. Now, the moving image component included historical footage of a bungle, or a traditional dance, filmed in 1935. There was a sound component, the Japana Manakai, or a Yolngu song cycle. Now, Japana, you may recall Japana Sunset Dreaming, the Yothu Yindi song, but Japana means in Yolngu sunset. And in Bugis, one of the languages of the fishermen who would travel to our waters, it means farewell. The contemporary footage in this is the clouds, which were synced together with bilma or clapping sticks to a Japana Manakai. Now, in this work, what we see is this limitless moment occur, this blurring. We have age-old art-making techniques merged with historical footage and combined with a contemporary expression. I'm going to now move from the north of the country to the centre, and I'm going to move 70 years back, but in linear time. And I'm going to talk about the work of an artist called Albert Namatjira. You may be familiar with this Western Aranda artist, but in his time, his works of art maybe weren't seen as progressive or innovative. These types of landscapes were perhaps seen as mimicking white painters even, adhering to a Western pictorial tradition. But now we know, decades after the artist's tragic passing, that he was actually reasserting claims to country, that he was reasserting his ties to his spiritual and culturally passed on country. Now this here is Rajitma, or Mount Sonder in the MacDonald Ranges. This is the country he inherited from his father. So we can see in this work that Albert Namatjira was not only stating his cultural and spiritual claim to that country, but also making a political statement around that. Other than those statements, Albert Namatjira was able to also support his family economically through his art. And unfortunately, during his lifetime, he entered into a very unfair agreement, which saw the public trustee sell his copyright after his death. Now, it would be a long and hard battle before that copyright would be returned only in 2017. Mind you, the artist was painting in the 40s and 50s. So think back to that first slide I showed you with the Indigenous Art Code campaign. Aboriginal artists are still fighting for the fair, ethical, and transparent sale of their own work. Now, Albert Namatjira's great-grandson, Vincent Namatjira, follows in his footsteps. He's an artist who creates these witty but also political works of art, like the one behind me, Close Contact. This is a painted sculpture, which includes on one side a self-portrait of Vincent Namatjira, and on the other side, Captain Cook. Now, it's a clever work because it reminds us of the wooden cutouts that you see at fun fairs or carnivals, where you're encouraged to place your own head or your body into the scene to take a souvenir photograph. And this clever move by Vincent puts us into the conversation about the two histories that exist here in Australia, our shared histories. Now, Albert Namatjira won the 2019 Ramsay Art Prize with this work, but in 2020, he was the first Aboriginal artist to win the Archibald Portraiture Prize in its 99-year history. He was the first Aboriginal artist to do that. Now, this shows not only a momentous moment for his own career, but it shows that art has the power to create institutional change. Hi, Vincent. Now, I want to stay in 2020 because it was such an unusual year for all of us. But in October, the Coulada Jutta exhibition opened in the Musée du Beaux-Arts in Rennes in Brittany. Originally intended to include this installation, Coulada Jutta, 550 spears and over 30 piti and kulaman. But you can imagine that shipping this type of work during COVID-19 would have been impossible or near to impossible. Freighting the work or sending art installation officers would have been impossible. And so 34 artists from the Anangu Pitjantjatjara Yakanjara lands came together and created a primarily painting-based exhibition, which they could send unstretched, rolled up, and ready to be stretched on site at the museum. This type of innovation and adaptation shows that artists are quick thinking and able to still provide cultural and economic outcomes, but also share their stories way across the globe, even during a pandemic. I might close here But hopefully, through my talk today, I've been able to show you some of the depth and breadth that exists within Aboriginal art. And hopefully you've been able to see the deep and tangible connection that artists have with country. How art is neither old nor new, but timeless. It is both. How Aboriginal artists are innovative and adaptive, and where art is a powerful lifeline, culturally, intellectually, financially, but also politically. Art has the power to create change, personal change, but also our shared histories change with it. I might leave you with this quote by Vincent Namatjira. Art is powerful, art is a weapon, and art has changed my life. Art has the power to change the world too. Natalia, thank you.